haze has been a problem for the city. You guys have worked hard to work with the railroad to get approval from this for years, and it's very exciting for the community to have this fixed. So thanks for your good work on this, John.
Thank you.
All right. Entertain a motion to set the date of public hearing for December 14th, 2021 regarding amendment to the FFY 2022-2025 TIP.
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, moved to second. Thank you. Any discussion? Those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstaining? Motion carried. All right. Policy committee comments. Supervisor Merkin, anything? Jacob?
Just wish everyone a happy Thanksgiving.
All right. City council? None? Entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
We are adjourned. Thank you.
Thanks
you.
for coming with us.
Happy Thanksgiving.
All right. I call the regular city council meeting for November 23rd to order. Welcome, council. Welcome those that are in attendance. Council, we are working from an amended agenda, tonight. One item was added to the consent, and that was a motion canceling regular city council meeting for December 28th, 2021. And also under item 17, the resolution approving change order. It says on the council packet number 1, it should be number 2. And then there's also not to exceed amount of $320,000 exclusive of sales tax. So when we get to consent, those 2 items are on the 2 items that are amended. So start with, I'm going to read a proclamation for Small Business Saturday, and I would welcome Sarah to come up and join me at the podium. Small Business Saturday. Small Business. Son? Have to eat it. I'm sorry. Small Business Saturday. Whereas the city of Ames celebrates our local small businesses and their contribution they make to our local economy and community, and whereas 90% of consumers in the United States say Small Business Saturday has had a positive impact on their community, and whereas the city of Ames supports our local small businesses that create jobs, boost our local economy, and preserve our neighborhoods. And whereas the COVID-19 pandemic has especially been hard on local businesses, and the city of Ames encourages consumers to support small businesses. And whereas advocacy groups and public and private organizations in the state of Iowa and across the country have endorsed the Saturday after Thanksgiving as Small Business Saturday. Therefore, I, John A. Hala, Mayor of the city of Ames, Iowa, do hereby proclaim Saturday, November 27th, 2021, a Small Business Saturday in Ames, and I ask that residents of our community support our local small businesses and merchants on that day and throughout the year with their patronage. Any comments?
Yeah, I have a couple.
Well, hi, everyone. My name is Sarah Dvorsky, and I am proud to serve as Executive Director for Ames Main Street. I'm super excited to be here today and have the support of City Council, but of the entire Ames community. Downtown Ames is home to several businesses, whether it's retail, restaurant, or service, and we're really excited that we have such a vibrant community. By supporting a small business in downtown Ames, between 52 cents and 70 cents of every dollar goes back into our local economy. While Small Business Saturday is just one day of the year, we encourage everyone to shop small, shop local, but also to shop and support the Ames community year-round. To learn more about the businesses that are in downtown Ames, I highly encourage everyone to check out amesdowntown.org, and we hope to see you all in downtown Ames soon.
All right. We're going to move on to consent. Council, does anyone wish to pull any item from consent this evening? I would like to see item 13 pulled just for some discussion. Anyone else? All right. Entertain a motion to approve consent, last item 13.
Moved. Second.
Roll call.
Aye.
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 Thank you. Hi.
Hello, Mayor.
I just had a question for you. This is an exciting project that you're working on with the bus recharging station, and I noticed you had a criteria list set up. And one of the things in the criteria list, it indicated that it was a much lower rating for what you're recommending being awarded for serviceability, maintenance, and there's one other aspect of it. And I don't think council's interested in spending a whole lot more money, but also from a long-term standpoint, did staff have any concerns about that not working or being able to be serviced, and then we'd have buses out of operation?
No, that's an excellent question, actually. And I just called our assistant director of fleet and facilities to double check that I had it right. But it's mainly scored lower in that area because the other two, ChargePoint and the other company there, have a modular units. So you can plug and play kind of units, where Siemens doesn't have that. This is their Siemens third iteration of this. So I think they've worked out some of their problems. I think the leading reason that we picked them, just FYI, is that they have a proven track record with Nova Bus, which is who we're getting.
Mm-hmm.
So they have no charging issues with them. The real difference would be that they would have to come on site to fix them. ChargePoint was the other one that was close in the budget, as you see. I think it was like $750, just under budget, $750. But they have not worked with Nova Bus, so we were not certain about the reliability of that. I'm not sure the scoring indicates that. Three people scored it. I would agree, as I just reviewed the scoring, but I think it's really based on the fact that it's modular units on the other one. So our mechanics could probably fix it. They are looking at getting a charging unit so that we could charge a bus at Cyride if for some reason one of the charging stations went down, a Siemens one, where they had to come out and actually fix it.
Okay.
Does that answer the question?
Yes,
for
it
you?
does.
Okay.
Thank you. All right. Entertain a motion approving item number 13.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right. Going to move on to public forum. This is the time that we set aside for comments from the public on topics of city business other than those listed on the agenda. And council will not take any action on any of your comments. And we ask people to limit their comments to 3 minutes or less. And I have one card from Richard. Richard? Again, Richard, I remind you, city business, please.
Well, when Julia Saxon gave me that notice to say I couldn't be at City Hall getting the door for people, it was for a year. And I was thinking the other night, just as I was going to bed, when I first came to Ames to live, I calligraphed out a copy of a poem of mine that, I mean, I'll read the first 4 lines of it. I gave some of you last week. It says, I'm thinking it should be called In My Family or In My Home as opposed to In My Country. And I just sort of want to, well, anyway. It is crime to measure space in feet, miles,
Richard,
parts
Richard,
of
please
meter.
just address council. You can talk to council, please, but not the audience.
Far worse than it is to kill time to seconds, hours, year. I think perhaps because I'm trying to change it to like In My Family or In My Home as opposed to In My Country, that it's like the rest of it. I mean, you know, they calculate all kinds of things these days. So a lot of the scientists do, and all the government does. And it's like, it was their own words that it would have been better for the Nazis to win World War II.
Okay,
for them
Richard,
to make the
city
decisions
business,
they were
please.
making.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to address council under public forum tonight?
If anybody wants a copy of this thing, I have some copies.
Okay, we will close public forum and move on to item 25, presentations, Ames Main Street regarding its vision for the future.
Well, good evening, Mayor and members of the City Council. I'm Steve Goodhue, and I'm Chair of the Ames Main Street Program this year. I'm joined this evening by Sam Stagg, who's our Chair-elect, Sarah Dvorsky, who is just here accepting a proclamation, Mindy Bergstrom, who chairs our Promotions Committee, and Benjamin Campbell, who also serves on our board from Planning and Housing. And let me start by saying thank you for placing us on the agenda this evening. I think it's been probably a couple years since we've been in front of the council to update you on the efforts of the Main Street Program, and we thought it was an appropriate time to do that. And we're just going to work through a very brief PowerPoint this evening, if we can put it up on the screen. Might just begin just by reminding you of who we are. If you can go to the next slide. We established the Ames Main Street Program in 2009. We're one of 54 Iowa Main Street communities. You can see a map up there of the other communities. We operate largely on 4 principles: organization, promotion, design, and economic vitality. And our committee structure is largely centered around that. And this is very much a public-private partnership that we do, and we certainly appreciate the support provided by the City of Ames. If you go to the next slide. Main Street has been active the past couple years, and again, it's been a while since we've been in front of you, and I thought you might appreciate just seeing a few of our accomplishments the past few years. City obviously supports our efforts financially, but we are largely dependent upon investor revenue, investor contributions, if you will. Everyone in the district is a member, but we certainly raise and ask for donations from investors. And we've actually increased our investor contributions to the program by over 50% the past 2 years. And we're got a very engaged investor base, if you will. We're working through a long-term financial and remarketing plan of Main Street. And in fact, we just had a board meeting today and talked through this. We've got more work to do here, and we'll certainly have more to tell you about here in the next couple, 3 months. We've expanded our promotional calendar with new promotions, a couple new promotions this year. We've conduct about a dozen different promotions throughout the year. Mindy Bergstrom serves as our promotions chair, all in an effort to bring people downtown and create more vitality in downtown as well. We've hosted several focus groups with downtown stakeholders to really assess and discuss future needs of downtown, which is really a precursor to some of our strategic visioning. And Sam's going to touch on that in just a few minutes. If you go to the next slide, facilitated a $75,000 Main Street, Iowa grant to assist the Nelson family with the rehabilitation of the building at 5th and Burnett. I'm sure you'll agree that's a really nice improvement to that structure and to that corner. And we're supportive certainly of other property owners and their efforts to rehab and do facade improvements to their property. Secured a grant through Story County for new directional signage. This happens to be a URA, Urban Revitalization grant, and we're installing new directional signage and furniture in the district. And certainly we're supporting the Lincoln Way development that I think is just on after this agenda. We see that very much as an extension of downtown. We're very excited for that development and look forward to the presentation this evening. So those are just a few accomplishments over the past couple of years. So what's next for downtown? Mayor Hala came to a board meeting earlier this year and challenged us to really look at what's next. We've got a lot of things going downtown, a lot of redevelopment, the downtown plaza and other things. And we're really focused on a strategic visioning process, really talking about what's the next big project or next big initiative for downtown. And Sam will touch on that in just a few minutes. And then Sam will also show you some streetscape amenities that we believe have outlived their useful life, that need some attention, and in which we need some assistance and financial support from this council to accomplish. And we'll be back during the budgeting process to make that request, and would look forward to your support on that. These are concurrent efforts that we're working toward, and again, we'll explain more of that as Sam comes to the podium. So with that, I'll turn the podium over to Sam.
All right. Hello. My name is Sam Stagg. I'm the chair-elect for the Ames Main Street Board. So thank you very much, members of council, John Hala. As Steve mentioned, there's a couple things I want to cover. Two elements being the future initiatives and strategic visioning one. So if we can go to the next slide. So what's next for Ames Main Street? We're excited to embark on some things here. And the conversation can go in one of two directions, or an interesting mix. One is to support or fund an existing project, initiative, or an institution, whether it's the Reinvestment District, the plaza that's coming in, the Octagon Ames History Museum, facade grants. There's lots of great things currently going on. So one direction is to support or fund something that's currently going on. Another one is to support or fund a new project or initiative. And there's been all sorts of ideas floating around over the past several years and months, whether it's public art or new signage, a parking garage. There's lots of many things that are on the table under discussion. So that's kind of the direction that the conversation go. Next slide, Susan. But in terms of thinking broadly first, the items to consider are some of these things we have listed here. So what's our mission and vision? What are some of those strategic goals that need to be folded into this? But also stakeholders, business owners, landowners downtown in the district, other investments. And of course, we have lots of things going on with Ames 2040 plan, as well as what are other communities doing. So those are just a few things that we want to consider among other things. And then ultimately, next slide there, Susan. In terms of the next steps to make this happen, we of course want to start with a big picture, and then arrive at some strategic goals to hit that mission and vision. And our group has actually done that over the past handful of years. We've gone through some recent revisioning and strategic planning where we have some of those framed in. We want to refine those a little bit. The next big step on our side of things is to get those stakeholders and investors in the same room and do some brainstorming in terms of projects and initiatives, and then ultimately narrow those down to a few viable options in terms of dollars and time frame, and then ultimately arrive at an action plan to make those things a reality over the next handful of years. And would love to, in the future, of course, present those to council and work with you all to make some of these things happen. So we'll keep you guys informed on what's going on over the next handful of months here. Next slide. So as mentioned before, Steve talked about a handful of streetscape things that we would like to see improved. And so these are just a couple of examples. We have some artistic lighting, some of those bollards and the light fixtures. We're actually in current conversations with the Public Art Commission on the best way to approach those and improve those. And just some other examples of benches and bike racks and planters that, as Steve mentioned, kind of beyond their useful life. So we'll be in front of this board again in the coming months during the budgeting process to really think through, how and what dollar amount we can and kind of work toward to get some of these things improved. So those are the two main focuses that I want to talk about tonight. And Steve's going to come back up with some closing comments.
Be happy to take any questions about where we're headed in terms of a strategic visioning process, in terms of some of these streetscape priorities. Didn't think we'd make a specific request tonight on these streetscapes items. Again, we'll be back during budgeting. But any questions for Sam?
Just two things, if I could. I've been floating an idea a bit about reimagining Main Street if it was to go one way to facilitate parking on one side, but then allowing the sidewalks to blow out and creating a tremendous amount of space down there for restaurants and other public uses. And so I would encourage the group to, and maybe there's not merit in that idea, but I've seen some other communities that have done that, and I think very successfully. And a second idea I just wanted to throw out, the mayor and I had a chance to spend some time in Coralville for the Iowa League of Cities event, and we spent some time at the Iowa River Landing. And one of the things that was really intriguing that I took away from that trip was the way in which they created opportunities for entrepreneurs. So the city partnered with, and John, you can fill in some gaps here, but they partnered with the developer to give opportunities for entrepreneurs that would never have been able to afford some of that space. As we think about some of these redevelopment opportunities, one of the things that I would love to see are ways in which we can create or maintain spaces for entrepreneurs. We've lost a lot of that entry-level space in Campus Town, and the downtown area has been an opportunity for that. So there's just a couple things I wanted to throw out. Thanks for your presentation.
Yeah, great ideas. Thank you. You'll definitely throw those into consideration.
What is your timeline for those next steps?
You bet. So of the next couple of months, internally, when I say internally, the Ames Main Street Board will work through some of those, the larger vision and mission, as well as the strategic goals. As I said before, we have some of those started and framed in. We want to refine those over the next couple of months. And then starting in earnest in January, we would start with that step number 3, where we invite some additional stakeholders and investors into a room over a course of maybe a handful of meetings and really start that brainstorming process. That would be in that January timeframe. And then take the next couple of months to refine that list, arrive at 2, 3, 4 viable options with some budgeting and a more specific timetable on how to implement those. And then hopefully get everything wrapped up by April, May, June, definitely by the middle of the year, in terms of having a real kind of a plan of action to maybe come back and speak with you all about that at that time.
And I just want to make sure that you're aware that the city council has had some requests from residents for more tables downtown. In the post-COVID world, there's this assumption that there will be the desire to have more places to sit, but also to eat and enjoy, not just the benches. So just so you know.
Great. Okay. No, that's a great idea too. Thank you for that.
Other questions?
Let me just close with our final slide and just say thank you for your ongoing event and financial support. We do a lot of events downtown, and you're, as a council, always great about relieving parking or whatever the case may be, helping us with those events, your continued financial support. I know our contract isn't up until, I believe, January during your budgeting process, but just appreciate your ongoing financial support. The accreditation approval tonight, which was on your consent agenda, your continued investment in the district. You know, the paver project was underway this past year, and it'll finish up next year. And we know that's a significant investment for you. We're very excited about the downtown plaza. I think that it'll be a great gathering point for people, and we'll bring a lot of folks downtown. We're excited about that. And as Sam mentioned, may even look for ways to extend that. In advance, we thank you for some future streetscape improvements. Again, we'll be back during the budgeting process for that, and just your continued partnership in this public-private partnership. So thanks for putting us on the agenda tonight, and thanks for your continued partnership.
I got a couple questions for you.
Sure.
Are you going to be developing your strategic goals? You mentioned strategic goals. Is that in the process? That's the process you're going to go through? Is that right?
That's right. Yeah. And as I mentioned, we have a couple framed in, or at least the start of some that we've been kind of kicking around over the past handful of years, but we'll refine those, and that'll paint the picture and vision for what we want to do specifically. Yep.
And you were talking about developing, mission and vision and brainstorming. You mentioned stakeholders. Does that include like shoppers and people that actually use the space too? I know I heard you mention business owners and the like. I know you're trying to be sensitive to our time, and I appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
But who all is that involved? Because like Lori just mentioned, if we're getting some feedback, it'd be an opportune time, I think, to find out what people who are actually shopping and or eating downtown might like. So I was just curious what thought you had on that.
Right. Absolutely. I think on a very broad level, the goal is to bring more people downtown. And those people are consumers, are families, kids, parents, students from Iowa State. And so most definitely, I think we would canvass, each of those demographics to bring them into the meeting and really begin to get a great understanding of what do the consumers want, and so I think that would definitely be a demographic that we fold into the mix. Yep.
And last question, Steve, we talked when I visited your board, and I appreciate you allowing me to come in.
Sure.
About the possibility of a SMID, self-taxing entity to try and, I know it's not necessarily exciting, but you've mentioned partnership, and certainly I know the council's been very supportive of, Main Street. I'm just curious if there's.
We have indeed had discussions about that. In fact, it was an agenda item today at our board meeting, and not able to talk much about that at this point. Certainly haven't had discussion with any property owners downtown at this point, but we'll come back and update you at a later date.
All right.
Great. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate
Thank you for the efficient presentation.
You're welcome. Thank you.
All right. We're going to move on to item 26, presentation of update regarding Lincoln Way mixed-use project for the downtown reinvestment district.
Kelly, you want to start off?
We just got to get the laptop hooked up.
I want to remind council why we're here tonight. We're on this project, the Lincoln Way project between Clark and Kellogg. Remember, this was an outgrowth of one of your top priorities a few years ago, and that was the Lincoln Way corridor plan. And the council had developed that particular plan. And one of the priorities, the first priority you established, was developing this area between, I believe it was Clark and Duff. So we started working with developers on possibly developing a really signature project. It was on the north side of Lincoln Way, as you remember. It started out with the Hunziker Development Company purchasing land. I think it's the first time since I've been here we had a company that was purchased that much land for one site. Kind of unbelievable kind of task that they had, which allows us to, I think, come up with a very exciting project for you. So it's evolved over time. I wanted to make sure we brought this to you before we even talk about entering into a development agreement, right? Talking about numbers, financing, all those costs. We're not going to talk about that. We just want to make sure that you get to see this picture now. If there's anything at the high level, 20,000 foot level that concerns you, now's the time to lay it out, because we don't want to spend all this time, come back with you in 2 months and find out that we fell short of your mark. So that's what we hope to accomplish today. Kelly, you want to add something before we get the presentation?
Yeah, for the most part, the applicant's going to go through the project details. So just to build off of what Steve said, that the location is really critical to the city. The council's reinforced that through the adoption of the Lincoln Way corridor plan. And later on, you identified this downtown gateway as the focus area that's the number one priority for the city. So we've been looking at this site and working with city council for over 3 years. You have a different development team here tonight than's ever presented to the council before. And you have a really exciting and interesting project that they're going to walk through tonight that I think when you look through the corridor plan, it's really identifying that we want to amplify downtown and have a synergy with how we do things on the south side of the tracks that are going to really bring energy to the north side of the tracks at the same time. So as we look at this, the corridor plan doesn't say there's one way to do it, but the real intent here is, do we see the interest, the activity, and the energy from this development to really be that catalyst for the whole Lincoln Way corridor, which then will help feedback north to the downtown. So keep that in your mind while you look at this. There's a lot of details that are left to come. We have some information about square footages and parking and all the other things that go into a site plan. But tonight we really need to understand, is this on target? Is it meeting the intent of the corridor plan? Is this really the catalyst project that we're looking for? And as more details will get developed here in the next couple of months. And with that, I'm going to give it over to Cody, and he's going to be present with the site plan elements. And then I know we have Chuck here to talk about the project as well.
So good evening, Mayor and Council. Chuck Winkleblack, Hunziker Companies, 105 South 16th Street. It's been a long time coming. Seems like I told Steve one day, every time I drive by City Hall, somebody would run out and flag me down and say, when are we going to be able to see what's actually going on? So we started, like Kelly said, just about 3 years ago. We're at the first assemblage of the property, and pandemic got in the way, slowed things down, and we're really excited to be here tonight. But early on, you know, I've stood at this podium a number of times over the past 25 years, but never for anything like this. And so early on, we knew that this was beyond the scope of what our company has done. And so we bring in front of you tonight what we feel like is a pretty powerful and impactful team of folks that we've been working with to come up with, you know, what we're going to show you tonight. So we've got the folks from ISG, and I'm going to let them do their own introductions. And then we also have Jake Christensen from Christensen Development that's done a lot of things in the East Village in Des Moines. So we'd like to start with just a little bit about, briefly, about ISG and what they're all about, things they've done quickly. Jake's going to tell you a little bit about himself and the few things he's done. And then we're going to walk through the project, and Cody there can manipulate. We sent you a few still shots, but he can manipulate it and turn it around and give you some different bird's eye perspectives. Again, we got to keep in mind that, like Steve said, that these are conceptual, so we're not looking at colors and bricks and that kind of stuff. But conceptually, we feel like we're in a great place. And with that, I'll turn it over to Derek with ISG.
Great. Thanks, Chuck. As Chuck mentioned, I'm Derek Johnson with ISG. I'm the executive president there, and I have with me tonight Cody Van Oss, who's lead architect on the project, and Art Baumgardner as project manager. ISG is a 400-person multidisciplinary design firm. We've got 11 offices across the upper Midwest, South Dakota, Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Iowa. We have about 100 people in the state of Iowa and about 65 in Des Moines. We're currently working on a project that's very similar in nature to this. It's a project in Sioux Falls, large-scale redevelopment downtown project, focusing on much of the similar program that is proposed here tonight. That project's, again, slightly larger scale, but very similar, and one we think relates well. In addition to that, we've worked on several multi-story downtown redevelopment projects in Mankato, and those include the Ide Bailey Tower, the Adelman redevelopment, and the Ridley Tower. And all of those projects also involve structured parking. So we're very eager and grateful to Chuck and his team to be a part of this project and to have an opportunity to be involved here and engaged here tonight. Again, I think our ability to combine the large-scale redevelopment expertise with the local vision and foresight of that team to help get this project started 3 years ago. We're really excited to be here to help realize that vision and help move this project forward towards reality. In addition to the work that we've done, we've also had a chance to work with Jake and the Christensen development team over the last 5 years on projects both inside the East Village and outside the East Village. And those include office projects and a large-scale industrial project as well. So with that, I would turn it over to Jake and have him explain a bit more about Christensen.
Thanks, Derek, and thank you all for having us tonight. For those of you who are not familiar, I'm president of Christensen Development. We're a boutique firm based in Des Moines. We've developed about $600 million in mixed use and urban infill projects. The majority of that is in Des Moines, but we've worked in Omaha, Grinnell, Newton, and we're actually working with ISG on a project that we've submitted of similar scale adjacent to the larger project that ISG is working on in Sioux Falls. So we've worked hand in hand with ISG on the planning of that, and it really, in a lot of ways, mirrors the work that we have collectively done with Chuck and his team on what we're going to present to you tonight. Over the course of those infill projects, and I'll list a couple of them in case you're familiar, the Zombie Burger Building, for all the money we spend on branding, it's known as the Zombie Burger Building, but if you've been there, that's one of our earlier infill projects. Most recently, we did a joint venture with Jim County on what we call the City Hall block. That was a $110 million mixed-use project with a 540-stall parking structure that we developed on behalf of the city of Des Moines. And In addition to that parking ramp, I've developed 2 other parking ramps in downtown Des Moines. And then quite recently, I was called in to assist in a parking ramp that did not work out. If you read the register regarding the 5th, my firm was asked to come in and take over when that project went into foreclosure. So we've worked with municipalities and parking for a long time. We're also very familiar with complex, multi-phased projects. A lot of my friends ask me why I do urban development, and I guess I just am not that smart or have a high pain threshold or a little bit of both. But it's a lot of fun for me to come into a place and create activity where there hasn't been any. And I think this particular site has a great opportunity to build off the energy of Main Street and all the hard work that's gone into that effort and be additive. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Cody to share more details about what we have been working on.
Excellent. Thanks, Jake. So the site, as Jake mentioned, is in a great location. There's lots of opportunity. It's right along the Lincoln Way corridor running through the heart of Ames. Also part of the intercontinental highway system there. We also have the railway running directly north of the site. Again, part of an intercontinental linkage. And if we zoom into our site here, possibly, we too are proposing a link between the north side and south side of the tracks, creating a stronger connection between the Lincoln Way corridor and Main Street just to the north. So thus the project is lovingly called The Link. We have several pieces of program here, starting on the northwest side. This is a parking structure located over the top of an existing parking lot managed by the city. Underneath here, where letter E is indicated, we're actually proposing some storefront there just to comply with city zoning ordinances, and then activate this corner of Clark and soften that transition into the Main Street storefronts there. On the east side of that development is proposed the one end of a pedestrian bridge crossing over the railroad. I was just on site earlier today and actually found myself cut off from the southern side of the tracks here and longing for a pedestrian bridge. So that was convenient or ironic maybe, but this link here could be a really strong improvement to the site and assist in activating Tom Evans Park and Main Street, as I mentioned before. Moving on to Kellogg Avenue, fronting Kellogg, we have a residential building proposed here with street level retail. And on the corner of Lincoln Way and Kellogg, we would propose some kind of hotel bar or bistro or something like that to activate that corner. Connected, again, if that's the hotel bar, this is the hotel indicated by letter F. Right now, to just give you some statistics, that's a 10-story building proposed there with about 130 rooms. On the first level, so street level, we would propose a large lobby that also empties into a conference center, which you can just see the roof of it here, indicated by some elevated patio space. But that is in the heart of the site, connected through the hotel lobby. On the upper level, I think that's a prime opportunity for a restaurant with an outdoor patio seating, casting views westward towards campus. I think that's a pretty impressive spot. Our proposed design at this point does have parallel parking along Lincoln Way. We also have a drop-off or porte-cochere here for the hotel. So actually the main entrance to the hotel would be on site or within this plaza area. You can see there's a couple axes at play. Number one, north-south, we're really trying to activate Lincoln Way and emphasize the connection to Tom Evans Park and the rest of downtown. So we have this strong north-south axis here. And this is all proposed as an open public plaza area with some terraced balconies here connected to a parking ramp fronting Gilchrist and connecting to building C, which is a commercial building. We also have a east-west axis that's somewhat askew or parallel to Gilchrist here, intersecting the site. So that's how we came up with a lot of the geometry driving the massing. If I could just return to building C here, the lower level, street level, or plaza level is all proposed as retail or food and drink. Maybe a brew pub could be a great anchor tenant here in the corner, again, drawing pedestrian or foot traffic off of Lincoln Way into the site, or vice versa from Main Street all the way down. And then finally, building B is, again, residential, proposed here with its own parking at street level towards Gilchrist at the north end of the site, and then retail or potentially some office space in this Clark Lincoln Way corner at street level. So just to help illustrate the vision, we have some bird's eye views highlighting all these different elements. So again, residential here at building A. This is our hotel, which is, I think, best connected to the open plaza here. You know, this could turn into a pretty active space on game day or something, some tailgating. And again, if we have retail or food and drink type tenants along this plaza level or terraced plaza, could be a really neat space to be. Building C is again, the commercial office space. You'll note here also starting to step down our massing as we go from east to west, again, to capitalize on those views towards campus. So that elevated restaurant on the hotel, step down, we can have either some condos on the upper level here as proposed, or some balconies maybe on the west end for those commercial office tenants. And then again, stepping down at the residential, some kind of amenity deck up above there. View from the southwest corner. And now we're looking from Kellogg towards Clark, and you start to see this secondary axis here. And we're envisioning punching some kind of breezeway or walkway through the commercial building to really emphasize that outdoor pedestrian experience all the way to Kellogg. Before I mentioned some retail along this street, and an access point or an entry into that axis would be a key element in the design. From Clark to Kellogg, you can just get a glimpse of a proposed, big screen or jumbotron in there to broadcast again on game day. You also see here some storefront on the street level of this parking ramp to the north. And just a quick view of that Instagrammable moment, if you will, some kind of eye-catching statement piece for right here. We're capitalizing on the vertical circulation already in place, but drawing people to use that pedestrian walkway to the ramp on the north side and Main Street beyond. And here's a closing view looking towards campus, just to highlight the experience from, again, these stair-stepped masses. Just a quick snapshot of some of the square footages. Residential units, we're looking at approximately, can't read that from here, but 180, 128 hotel rooms. These are just based on rough square footages and then efficiency calculations. So we don't have floor plans ironed out yet to verify that, but just based on our best educated guesses. Thank you. Overall square footages, you can see retail there in particular at 33,000 square feet. And then the food and drink tenants would be an additional 27,000 square feet in the proposed design. And again, it's very flexible and fluid at this point in time, but that's where we're at.
34,000
that could be in the residential buildings, amenity space for the tenants there, or commercial. And I think also that terraced plaza is also factored into that. And as Chuck mentioned before, if it's helpful for you guys, I also have the model here, and we can just pan around in that to give you guys a better idea of different design elements, or if you have any questions on specific areas, we can hone into that. With that, I think we'll turn it over for questions, unless Kelly, Chuck, and team, if you have anything to add.
Questions?
I have one very simple question, and that's about access to the pedestrian walkway. So it looks like there's you can access it, but both through the sort of tan-colored terraced material on the left, as well as the structure on the right, the parking structure. Is that right?
That's correct. We would certainly want this to be as accessible as possible. As you pointed out, there's several connection points on the south side of the site. Right now, at least on the north side, it's a little more straightforward with just a single, stair tower connected on that end.
Thanks. I like that it doesn't appear that you have to first go into a commercial building in order to get to the walkway.
Right.
That's what I wanted to check. Thanks.
Good point.
I have a couple of questions. There seemed to be a little bit of confusion between the staff report and what we saw in the renderings. I think the staff report mentioned the office building being 8 stories, and on the renderings it's labeled as 6 stories. How tall is that?
Yep. And just to clarify, sorry for the confusion, but there are 6 levels of proposed commercial office, plus street level retail, plus top level condo. So 6 levels of office, plus 2 is 8 total stories.
Great. This is maybe a question for Jake. This is about the parking ramps.
Okay.
I may be wrong about this, but you probably can correct me. It seems like the city of Des Moines had agreed that they were not going to build new parking ramps unless they were able to be retrofitted as apartments at some point. And I'm just wondering about these ramps. They appear to be ones that have parking going on an angle as opposed to the flat deck with a side entry. Can you say something about that? Is that, I don't know what the difference is as far as accommodating parking spaces, and I'm interested in us being able to retrofit them if we can. I don't know that the rest of council is interested in that, but I figured I would ask.
No, I think that's a great question. That is a topic of discussion that is, I think, relevant to have. In reality, parking ramps, no matter how they're designed, are exceptionally difficult to retrofit. The ceiling height that is required for a parking structure is very different than what we would expect in a residential or commercial dwelling. So in an effort to keep them as efficient as possible and cost effective, that you typically see them shorter than, if there's 5 stories of parking, it's equal to about 3 stories of what I call a normal building. So there's a significant challenge. I think there are portions of this project where parts of the ramp could be retrofit. Useful life of a parking ramp, depending on maintenance, is 50 to 60 years. I think it's difficult to predict what will happen with cars in that period of time, but I'm rambling around your question. It's not as simple as just saying we want this to be retrofittable. And there are portions of it that could be, but it would think the other challenge that comes into it, and this is a really good vantage point, if you look at the ramp that we have drawn on the north, a typical residential building would have a depth of plus or minus 55 feet. And that's almost 3 times that probably. So
At least double.
you get into what's actually usable for retrofit as well. So there's a litany of challenges that go with that. I'll just summarize by saying the street level sides, we might be able to do some facade, some liner portions of it in an efficient way in the future. Beyond that, I think it gets almost impossible.
My last question has to do with the pedestrian bridge. And I'm wondering what the concept is for the materials for that bridge. I mean, is this a concrete bridge? Is it an iron steel truss, whatever, I don't know, metal? What is it?
Yeah, good question. And frankly, we're not quite to that level of detail. We do know, however, there are some power lines that run parallel to the tracks that we need to go under. And that's going to require us to have some kind of barrier above the pedestrians to shield them from the electrical power lines. So that could inform the structure and might lead us towards something more of a truss design with some steel would be my guess at this point. But all I can say for certainty is that we'll have to have some kind of lid on it for protection, so it won't just be totally open to the sky.
I just know I've heard stories about the concrete bridges over railways that have to keep getting repaired because of the jarring by the trains. And I'd hate to see us in an endless cycle of repairing a bridge like that.
No, that's a very good point, and certainly the structural engineers will have their hands full to figure that out.
Other questions?
So I just want to say this is an amazing project. And all of us up here care deeply about this community. And we've been watching the space sit undeveloped for several years, looking forward to the day when we would actually be here tonight looking at these projects and just sort of visualize how the landscape of downtown will change. This is just really terrific. I hope people are just going crazy with excitement to see these kind of images. My questions, I'm going to keep them on a very high level tonight. And but my main thing I want to say is thank you for the work that went into this, and it's beautiful. But a couple of just small things. We are in the process of working on our climate action plan, and so we don't have the luxury of doing just one thing at a time, so we have to do multiple things at a time. So if we think about the development in terms of some of our goals and other aspects, are there opportunities to think about this project in terms of some of the sustainability goals that the city is developing? So for example, is solar a possibility on rooftops or things like that? I mean, have you, in some of the developments you've done, have you incorporated a carbon strategy as part of the design features?
Can I take that? Yeah. So I referenced the City Hall block parking structure directly east of Des Moines City Hall. That's a net zero parking structure, and it was accomplished through LED lighting, which is quite common, but then a solar array on the top of the structure. So the answer is absolutely. Solar parking ramps are a great location for solar array.
I would also just throw out there, this site and this development as a catalyst to the rest of the Lincoln Way development. We are going vertical compared to everything around. So gives us plenty of clear access to sunlight on the rooftops.
Great. Anything else about, I mean, at this stage, there's still a lot of work that you're going to be doing in terms of the building itself, but any other major concepts that the community would want to know about in terms of that aspect of the project?
I would also point out as there's 4 main structures, or 5 maybe, if you will, with the parking structure on a fairly large site. So there's smaller footprints of the buildings on a larger site makes way for more green space. So although it's more vertical and there's higher density that way, the footprint of the building does make way for a little more green space at the pedestrian level. So the ratios there are a little bit better than a typical urban development.
Yeah, that's great. Another thing that has been important to many of us on council is thinking about multiple ways of accessing amenities in our community. And so Lincoln Way is a very poor transit area for people who are using bicycles. And we're really trying to think about this. My understanding is the sidewalk along that south side, again, it's not been developed yet, but would probably be a huge improvement to what had been there before, certainly. But could you speak to the issues of access of multimodal transportation?
I think I'll probably have to default to, we still have a lot of design left to do at this stage, but the current 4-lane at Lincoln Way, again, I mentioned I was just on the site earlier today, and walking along Lincoln Way currently, it's pretty uncomfortable, where the sidewalk is located currently next to that traffic right now. So the additional parking lane might assist with that, as well as a wider easement for pedestrian traffic before the site, before the building masses begin, might lead to that. But again, I think the main improvement that we're making is really just being able to connect north to south, and this is kind of the focal point for that multimodal transportation. But I think we've mentioned the word catalyst before several times. This site should start considering what does the experience for a pedestrian look like along Lincoln Way all the way to Duff, and start looking at more of that context for trail and bike routes.
Right, absolutely. Well, and that's well said. And then the final thing at this point, back to the pedestrian bridge. I think everyone's really fascinated by that. So we don't have anything quite like that here. But is it correct to say that this is all going to be open? The pedestrian bridge will be an open space, or will it be enclosed?
Again, a lot of design has to happen, but we already brought up some concerns about movement.
Are you asking whether it's climatized?
Well, I would love for
condition space. Sure.
It's not conditioned.
I don't think that's probably likely, but it would be protected from the elements. Maybe there's some electric heating or something that could supplement the space, but probably open air construction, not conditioned space would be my guess.
Okay. And you use the word catalytic, and I think that's a great concept because when I think about downtown and the changes that are likely to take place over time, I absolutely see this project as being catalytic for work going to the north. And actually, I would say even further east on East Lincoln Way. I mean, at some point, we would love to see further development continuing on the east. So I think this is a really exciting project. So I have 1,000 more questions about the design, but that's not appropriate for tonight. I just think it's beautiful and we're excited. So thank you.
Thank you.
Please go ahead.
So the downtown gateway zone is one of the few where we have a minimum bicycle parking standard. And so I was just wondering if you could, it kind of speaks to Tim's point too, but where do you plan to put that?
Sure. No, good question. And I know it probably doesn't show up in the renderings because, again, it's just a level of detail that we're not there yet. But we have a lot of open space, a lot of green space on the site. I don't think we'll have any issues providing that bicycle parking
Yeah.
in a variety of locations, probably concentrating mostly right in the heart here, but also maybe some in the residential parking ramp or
Yeah.
In the parking ramp structures or around the parking ramp structures. So there's plenty of space to accommodate that, and it does kind of get back to the bigger picture question of where's the trail, where are the bikers actually going to be commuting on this site.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I was just, like I said, I'm excited that we even have an area where we have a minimum bicycle parking standards.
And there's a lot of exciting things going on. You know, the new South Grand extension, the trails that lead out south of town towards the High Trestle Trail, connections up to Ada Hayden, down Hunziker. It would be interesting to kind of map those out and how other opportunities to interact with our site, and like you said, make that accessibility. Let's see, what was the word Tim used? Multiple ways of accessing our amenities.
But you can use the other microphone too. And just for council for bike parking, the way it's described in the zoning, it's trying to emphasize secure parking for residents within residential buildings, but then beyond that, there's visitor parking for whatever consumer is showing up to go out for the evening or to do whatever there. So it's a mix of requirements that'll probably be spread throughout the site and within buildings.
Other questions? Rachel, do you have any questions?
No, I don't have any questions. I think it all looks pretty good for this stage.
Thank you.
John, could I ask one other question?
Yeah.
With all this talk about the front on Lincoln Way and bike accessibility, et cetera, what is happening on Gilchrist? I mean, is that going to be leveraged in some way, or is it really just the backside of the development?
Well, I think, obviously the pedestrian bridge landing, I don't know if we really have a good view set up for here. But the pedestrian bridge landing is fronting Gilchrist, so there'll be some activation there to that side of the street. The residential building on the west side is also fronting Gilchrist. And then one end of the commercial space with an elevated amenity space also fronting Gilchrist. So I guess the only thing really back of house, if you will, would be the parking ramp structure. But as we're showing here, we really foresee that being clad in such a way that it works in the urban environment with some masonry, and it's not just a barren concrete structure. So, what is happening on the rest of the sites out here, it's not necessarily part of our development plan, but that there is a lot of potential for this space sandwiched between Main Street and the link.
I would add one more thing to that. As Cody mentioned, significant portion that's outside of our control. But if you look at these images, you can see we've got four-sided architecture on all of the structures that are proposed in the development. So we're setting the tone for what else should happen adjacent to us.
So with Gilchrist, it's a public street, but it's not a right of way that's normal for a street. So that will be a detail that has to keep being worked through. We're not asking for additional dedication, but what can be done with minor setbacks for sidewalks or something still has to be looked at. But it's not going to be a traditional street at the end of the day.
Would any of the housing be owner occupied, like condos, or is it all rental?
We do have some condos proposed at some of the higher levels. So building C on the upper level, some condos proposed. Building A could have a portion of it be condos, but I think most of it is proposed as rental properties at this point, kind of targeting that young professional. Maybe they went to college in town here or something, and are looking for a place to work and live and play all in one urban environment.
We've been talking a lot about some of the exterior aspects of the project, but my goodness, it's very exciting to think about the business uses, and I think there'll be a lot of interest in the residential aspects of this. So that's very fun to think about that too.
Can you comment on, is this going to be all built at once, or is this going to be phased? Can you give us some kind of idea so council has an idea? I mean, obviously you're presenting a completed image, and we understand that. And I know some of this probably ties into a developer agreement, but what is the vision in terms of completing this? Because that may enter into some of council's, opinions also.
So I'll defer to one of the developers probably for a more detailed answer, but I think it will be a phased approach, and the massing is broke up in such a way that's easy to conceive of one building being built after another.
So the question becomes is one get built and then it's 5 years later and then the second one gets built, and then is it 3 years later and then the parking ramp follows, or is it, one after the other because it's going to come all to home to roost, so to speak, in the future. So I think it'd be helpful to know that at this point.
I'd love to tell you that we have it 100% pre-leased and that we're just going to build the whole thing at one time.
Oh, well, we'll just cut it off right there then.
So tell all your friends so that we get some people who want to be part of this. And I'm only half joking in that. The answer to your question is, and this is a good question, it came up in the City Hall project in Des Moines. It's multi-phased, and as a development team, we're going to do our best, but in an effort to give council comfort within that development agreement, there were stages. And so we had milestones that we needed to hit. So I can assure you that Chuck and I haven't done a project together, but I think all developers are cut from the same cloth. We want to do as much as we can, as fast as we can. And I can give you the team's word that that's going to be the effort, but I expect in the development agreement that there'll be some milestones that we'll have reasons to hit as well, so that you've got some teeth essentially in that agreement. But one last comment to that, if I may. Starting from one side of the site and working across is going to be a lot simpler sequence from a constructability standpoint. And so in an ideal world, we will basically gauge the market after this starts to get some air and people comment on it. But ideally, we'd work from one side to the other, and that'll largely be determined on whether we get stronger interest from the hotel or from the commercial components. I think we're all very confident that there is going to be a workforce that's going to want to live in these units. It's the other two that I think are the more difficult to give you predictions as to how fast those will come.
And can you comment on, from your staff report, it mentions that the city would end up owning the north parking ramp and the pedestrian bridge. Is that correct? It'd be built by the team and then it'd be turned over. Can you comment on how that would be set up? What thoughts you have on that?
Kelly or Chuck, do you want to?
Yeah, I think we're here to talk about the concepts tonight. And I think a lot of that our discussion with Steve is that there's a lot to be worked out in the developers agreement. And so I'd rather not speculate on that because we've got a long ways to go in a short amount of time. But we've been working very closely with Steve and Kelly, and we'll get Dwayne involved here soon. But yeah, I think the intent would be for the city to be heavily involved in the parking. And I think that's as much as that we really know today. Fair, Jake?
I think that's accurate.
And I was encouraged to see, because the council previously saw some concepts several years ago that had a lot of 3-bedroom and 4-bedroom units. Can you kind of talk about the renters that you're going to be targeting? You only have a few 3-bedrooms, which is you have 10 3-bedrooms, I think, showing your chart. So
can you zoom in on that so we can see that? Or? It's a little difficult to read in the presentation, but if you see, we've got studios, 1-bedrooms and 2-bedrooms, and then some 3-bedrooms. And the 3-bedrooms being the largest are not what you would call basically student housing. This is the apartments that are proposed in this project are truly market rate workforce type housing. So it would be very different than what you would see from a student housing development. It's call it a normal apartment, for lack of a better description.
Which I know council has had reservations on in terms of this area, and so I think this vision is more consistent with that. Just two more comments, and one is that on the condo side, Tim mentioned in a previous presentation about being on Iowa River Landing, and they barely built some condos on top of a hotel, actually. The regret they had, they didn't build enough of them because they all sold out right away. And there's a waiting list right now, so it's very interesting how that's really catching on in some of these downtown areas. So anyway. Last thing on the Ped Bridge came to mind was, for those of us who've been to Kansas City, the Kansas City Union Station, there's that Ped Bridge. It goes across the tracks that goes over to elevator shaft and stairs, and then goes down to a barbecue place. It just dawned on me, that's open. And they have a similar climate to what you have as well, too. It's a big steel structure. So anyway, I can see this be akin to that. So, all right, any other questions? All right, so we'll open up public comment tonight. If there's anyone that wants to address council on this item before they give some direction to staff, they're welcome to do so. So if you actually introduce yourself and limit your comments to 3 minutes or less. Thank you.
Hello, council. My name's Ryan Davis, 4201 Crestmore here in Ames. For your information, I own 2 of the 3 lots north of Gilchrist there. And Tim, I know about 24 people that aren't jumping up and down crazy in love with this project. So not everybody's that way, okay? Anyway, I do have some concerns. Sometimes you got to play devil's advocate on these things. You got to use common sense. What happens if this project fails, either before, during, or after the construction? Fort Dodge is a good example. There are many multi-story buildings downtown Fort Dodge. A lot of them are sitting vacant, abandoned, and or run down. They've even brought developers in with tax breaks to revitalize these buildings, but the developers took the money and left without doing anything. Now, what's the failure plan? Do we give them tax dollars to build it? Do we give tax dollars to refurb it down the road? Or do we give tax dollars for both? You brought up, the Gilchrist and everything, but if you look at sheet 5 and 6 of the proposal, we have loss of sunlight for the winter months of the year. We use on the north side of the track, or the north side of Gilchrist, we use normal, regular ice melt, snow, natural, as well as solar heating. And if you look, all the shading goes way over the tracks. So 4, 5, 6 months out of the year, we don't see sun at all, which will require more chemicals to be put down on the roads, including on Gilchrist, which hardly gets any right now because it's so open, even before the buildings were knocked down. But in some of the things were addressed tonight about power lines and noise and all that stuff. But the major sticking point for me is the pedestrian bridge. I will tell you right now, I will not allow an easement over my property. On September 28, 2017, Chuck came to my office and made a lower than market value offer for my property. Like anyone with common sense, I turned it down. In the winter of 2019, 2020, my attorney reached out to Chuck and his team to see if there could be another offer on the table. At that time, their lawyer replied with the statement of, they do not need your property for their project. And if they did, it would be lower than the original offer. Once again, common sense doesn't make any sense on this. So when you rezoned my property in 2017, 2018, whenever that was, you made it illegal, according to city code, to sell one of my properties without selling the other one. So the only solution I could come up with to make all parties happy, you guys get what you want, I get what I want, developers get what they want, relocate me, relocate my businesses and my properties. I don't want to be next to these guys. I don't want them as my neighbors. They haven't been very neighborly up to this point. And I don't think you would want to live next to this either. Live, work, whatever. So, like I said, just relocate my businesses and my properties. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? All right, close public comment. All right, so Steve, you want to summarize what we're looking for tonight for council?
And now that you look at the basic concept, and I want to emphasize again, the concept could be tinkered with because these are just initial discussions and thought process with the developers. If you would like us to proceed, you just give us motions to proceed with negotiations with the development team for this project. We will then start to roll up our sleeves and we'll try to hammer out a development agreement and finalize the concept plans. We can report back to you. You'll have to approve a developer agreement ultimately, and also a major site plan, Kelly? Is it major site, minor, what is it? Major site plan. We don't have much time. I would like to get this done before the end of February when we submit our, we have to submit our reinvestment district in the February 25th. So it doesn't give us much time, a lot of work to do, but we're willing to move ahead on this project. All we need is motion to ask us to proceed. Gives them a message to the staff and the developer. You like what you see, and you want to try to hammer out an agreement that's acceptable to both parties.
Move that we proceed on with negotiations.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, any discussion?
I-
Go ahead, Gloria.
Sorry,
We'll go
I'd just
David.
like to say that when we first rezoned this as the gateway, I voted against it because I'm not really in favor of the scale of the buildings that we allow in this area compared to the scale of the buildings in downtown. I will be voting for this because it seems kind of a Pyrrhic gesture at this point to vote against it. And I hope that it succeeds if we do go forward with it. But I think there will be some challenges in our current economic climate.
Thank you. David?
Just thinking back on the Lincoln Way corridor plan and what we're seeing in this project now and the effort that we undertook in creating the downtown gateway zone, I think this is exactly what all that work was for. It's as a catalyst, not the end game, but I really do think this has the potential to bring the density downtown to take advantage of the structure that's been established over all these years on Main Street. I think it could result in really, really great things. Look forward to the future details.
Anybody else?
I would just say I'm excited too. I mean, I think this meets a lot of our goals. People don't think of it necessarily, but increasing density in our core is so important to a greener city and to having more abundance and option for housing. So I really like the increase in the residential units on this, and I think the density is exciting. So
another aspect of this that I think about is how a project affects our connectivity as a community. So when I see a project like that, I see people from all over the community spending time there and connecting. Those are important aspects. Those aren't dollar and cents type of attributes, but those are things that make a community. And you see that in some of the projects you've been involved with. And so this is going to be a great project for the city. Thanks for your work.
Rachel, any comments?
I'm good.
Okay, thank you. All right, those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Any opposed or abstaining? Motion carried.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Thank you all. All right, going to go on to item number 27, hearing on rezoning of multiple properties on Tripp Street from suburban residential medium density to suburban residential medium density PUD. Kelly?
So as we Ray's going to introduce the item. I just want to point out that we put on the dais tonight an updated contract rezoning agreement for you to look at. We'll address that later in the presentation.
Okay.
So. Yeah. You're there already, right?
Everybody was there for that. The whole audience was there.
Okay. Good evening, Council. I'm Ray Anderson. You haven't seen me for a while. This proposed rezoning, I put a graphic up on the screen. The boundary of it is shown with the red line. It includes two lots, two platted lots, lots 1 and 2 of South Fork Subdivision First Edition. The lot on the right has a 61-unit building that was approved for use by Independent Senior Living in 2002. And the lot on the left, which is lot number 2, has 7 12-unit apartment buildings. And both the 61-unit building and the apartment buildings are 3-story buildings. And in addition to the 7 12-unit buildings, there is a community center building as part of that complex. And it was approved as a major site development plan by the city council. And that was back in 2002 as well. And there are 84 apartments in those 7 buildings. So when you add the units for the independent senior living and the units for the apartment buildings together, we have a total of 145 units. The applicant is proposing the rezoning to add a planned unit development overlay zone to the existing zoning, which is FSRM, which is suburban residential medium density. And the PUD designation would allow use of the entire site as household living with apartment dwellings, with no requirements for independent senior living, due to the applicant's proposal to reserve all 145 apartments for a period of 30 years for individuals or families whose income is 60% or less of the area median income calculated for Ames. The definitions and requirements for eligibility will be in compliance with the Internal Revenue Service Code Section 42, commonly known as the Low Income Housing Tax Credit or LIHTC program requirements. And the PUD would also allow a reduction in the minimum number of required parking spaces by a total of 36 spaces, provided the units are affordable housing for low and moderate income households, as I just described. Without going into a lot of detail from the report, which we can get into if you'd like, but our recommendation, as the city manager's recommendation, is to approve on first reading the request for rezoning with a shared parking agreement and contract rezoning agreement, including the following provisions for the PUD: that 145 units of housing affordable to households making 60% of AMI or less for a minimum of 30 years. That's A. B is reduction of required parking by 36 spaces. And C, no requirement for senior living within the 61-unit residential building. In addition to the report and our recommendation, there is a draft of a contract rezoning in your packet that would be part of this, that would need to be signed by the mayor and the property owner.
And as I mentioned, the one that was included in the packet on Friday was a draft. We've been in conversation with the applicant and their representatives here tonight, and they can explain a lot about this. The way we look at this is it's a 30-year affordability period, and that's a great benchmark for us in terms of a commitment to affordable housing. It is the reason, it is the justification for the PUD overlay. Without that, staff would not be proposing to support it. So we think it's an appropriate number. But the way the programming is set up that the applicant wants to take advantage of with the low-income housing tax credits, as Ray said, it's referenced to some IRS code, section 42, and it's administered by IFA, but there's also IRS regulations that go into that. And although there is a 30-year combined requirement, it's not described as a 30-year requirement under all of these rules. It's really viewed as two separate 15-year periods. So that's one reason why the contract that I've put up on the dais has been adjusted, is to kind of fit more into the parlance of the section 42 requirements, rather than just maybe our very basic expectations here about what it is. At the end of the day, the expectation is still it's households making less than 60% or less of AMI. It is two 15-year periods of compliance for affordability. If the project does not operate in a manner that's consistent with that, they would be violating the contract rezoning agreement. The agreement specifies that they need to give us an annual report, basically what they have to provide to IFA to show how they're maintaining compliance with IFA requirements. Then we will also get a copy of that to ensure that they are doing that, just to be on top of it. There's a long history of how we got today. We didn't really review that with you, about how the prior owner had gone into contract with IFA and had not operated this as a senior living facility. But we're really not looking at it as what happened in the last 15 years. Staff is really looking forward and saying, let's look at this as a 30-year commitment to affordable housing for the community. And that's really why we're supporting this. With the contract that you received, it is not yet signed because of the late hour that we made this change. And under state law, to agree to this binding agreement for affordable housing, it had to be signed before we conclude the public hearing tonight. So what staff is recommending, that you open the public hearing, you take comment from the public, you have your discussion, but please don't close it tonight. And we're asking, and the applicant had already asked for this, if you would consider potentially having a special meeting before December 14th. That would really facilitate the applicant's application that needs to go to the state still before the end of the year and be approved before the end of the year. If it is not approved by the state, and the applicant can speak to this by the end of the year, they're likely not eligible any longer for the tax credits, and they would not be able to make this 30-year commitment for their property. So we're encouraging council to see if that's an option for an additional special meeting to allow for the continuation of this hearing to a date certain, and allow for the return of the agreement, and then for hopefully a 3-reading approval at that same time. So with that, Ray or I are here for questions, and the applicant is also here to speak as well.
Questions?
I think this is a really great opportunity. My only question is, does the 30 years adhere to the property regardless of who owns it? Or does the change in ownership somehow void the agreement?
It does not. So the way that our city attorney has drafted this, it applies to successors and assigns. So it's not just with TWG, who is the current owner. Whoever takes possession would be subject to this contract. And Ryan can talk about the same thing through the LIHTC program. You can't get out of the obligations of LIHTC by selling it to somebody else, and he can speak to that in much more detail than I can.
Yes, thank you. I'm Ryan Kelly with TWG Development. And Kelly, that was perfect explanation on the project. So he's exactly right. There's actually will be 3 governing documents that would enforce that's attached to the deed. There's an existing land use restriction agreement. We would have your guys' document and agreement as well. That's recorded. And then upon rehab, to what Kelly's point is we're applying for new credits to facilitate the rehabilitation here as well, which is about $4.5 to $5 million. So not only are we extending the affordability period, we're investing resources on that level. there will be that land use restriction agreement as well. So there's really 3 binding agreements that's attached to the property, not the developer. So good question. Thank you.
Other questions?
I do have a question. If this is adopted, and then we have a new period starting April 1st, where we have an additional requirement for average median income, how many leases would need to be broken because of that new requirement kicking in, which might not apply to everyone who is currently renting from this complex?
That's a good point. So right now, a portion of the property to the east, the 3 or 4 story building there that's deemed senior living, has some market rate units, and so we're proposing that it's all 100% affordable. We've owned the property for about 8 months, and so we've already started making that transition already to people that qualify in order to maximize those credits. So it's already happening. So really what we're asking for is all the people that are there now are going to remain there. So great question. And really there's no turnover under that scenario. The other part of this, the rehab process is what we do is we actually relocate them in hotel suites on site. So they're not moving off site. The rehab for their unit's done in about 5 days and they move back into their unit. So really the permanent relocation is non-existent on these properties unless there's a choice to move on their own behalf.
Okay, I don't think I fully understood that. So I'm asking for the number of leases that people who are currently living in these properties who would no longer be eligible after April 1st. Are you saying that that's 0?
That should be 0. So there's a handful of units that have already transitioned over that were either students or above income. There will be a handful that will be relocated at that point, but it's 10 or less.
And so those 10 or less would have to be located off the property altogether,
Right, because they would no
100%
longer
kicks in.
income qualify, correct?
Okay.
So can I just clarify between the two? If they have a valid lease, you can't break their
Exactly.
lease,
That's it.
correct?
So it's only on lease renewal. They can kind of opt to move out of
Okay,
that
yeah,
one.
thanks for that clarification.
Yep.
So their lease doesn't come up again until November or whatever it is, then
They're grandfathered in, exactly.
So when you said 10, are you counting people in those circumstances as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, correct.
Thank
Yes.
Other questions? Okay, before I open the public hearing, council, one of the things that if you're interested in pursuing with this agreement is we're calling a special meeting, and they've asked for suspending the rules to have 3 readings on one meeting, which requires a supermajority or 5 of 6 council members. So Diana sent out a notice asking if you were available on December 1st. And the reason I'm asking is because it needs to be date certain in our motion to continue the hearing. So
We do want to open the hearing.
I know, we will. I just want to make sure when we open it, I'll need to get a motion to keep it open. I want to have in that motion a date that we can all be sure we're here. So can everyone be present either by Zoom or in person on December 1st at 4 p.m.?
Yeah. I have a conflict at that time, I believe.
Okay. Rachel, you said you could be available. Is that right or not?
Yep.
Okay, so we can get at least 5 out of 6.
That was a yep and not a nope.
Was that a yes?
It was a yep.
Yes.
Thank you. All right. Any other questions for Ryan or for staff?
So just to clarify, this neighborhood has been extremely active in the past. Any feedback from neighbors on this that we know of?
Right.
There was when we went to the zoning board of adjustment for variance. They first requested a variance and that was denied.
But those weren't. So we had one letter from a nearby apartment owner concerned about the rezone at the Planning and Zoning Commission level. We had participants in a variance request at ZBA, but I don't believe those were residents of the neighborhood. I think they were more so parties that were interested in seeing the affordable housing happen. So that the fair comment would be, we have not received comments from the neighborhood since we've noticed this project as a PUD, which would have been noticed in the last 2 to 3 weeks because we had a planning and zoning commission meeting last week, and now you have the public hearing tonight. So there's been no neighborhood or adjacent property owner input in the last 2 to 3 weeks, other than the one apartment owner that opposed changing the affordability requirement. They may have believed it was going away rather than being extended. It was a little unclear.
And maybe I missed this in here. So what happened to the ZBA?
So since TWG bought the property last fall, we became aware that it was non-compliant with the senior living requirement. Ray has been in contact with them about how to bring the property into compliance, either to fill it with seniors as required, or to see if there was another option to provide use relief. And originally the applicant had pursued a use variance. That variance was denied by the Zoning Board of Adjustment. They couldn't meet the findings for that variance. And then that was earlier this fall. And then once that was denied, they chose to pursue this PUD rezoning option to try to bring the site into compliance and to provide the affordable housing.
Okay.
I think that was a recommendation by staff at that point to go
Yeah,
through the
I think
PUD process.
it was the best available option if you wanted to support affordable housing in lieu of senior housing.
Okay, thanks.
If I could add, I had some communication with the CCO AMS representatives. I reached out to them and let them know that this was going to be on our agenda. And I believe, forwarded this communication to over 100 people. And there was a subsequent communication, but it really wasn't about, there wasn't a clear expression of opinion as to the ultimate question for us tonight. There was some concern about how they had just learned about it when council did on Friday, and yet we are voting about it on a Tuesday. So there was that, but nothing about the underlying merits as I understood it.
Thanks for reaching out to them.
Yep. Anything else? In light of the fact that Gloria said she had a conflict, how about Thursday, the 2nd of December at 4 p.m.? Did you check your calendars? Rachel, too, if you could just let me know if that would work for you.
That works. That works.
Rachel, does that work for you?
Sorry, what time was it again?
4 o'clock in the afternoon on Thursday, December 2nd.
I cannot do 4 p.m.
What time can you do?
Anytime before 4.
Okay. How about 3 p.m.?
I mean, this meeting is going to be a 5-minute phone call, so I can make whatever work.
Okay.
It works for me.
3.
Okay. All right. We will not have the time established, but at least we know that we can get a time to work out, probably 3:15, 3:30. Diane will send out a memo, but we'll do it before 4. So we'll have all 6 there then.
As far as I understand it, you just have to continue it to a day, not a time.
Right. That's what we're gonna do
If
tonight.
you're comfortable with the second, then just that could be the motion, and we'll notice it. You always have to notice it, obviously, for the time on that day.
I just want to make sure that we had someone that we could all meet at a particular time. That's all. Okay.
And if I just could add, I want to interrupt to follow up on what I was just saying about my outreach. Now that I think about it, there were a couple of communications that seemed to understand why this would be a good development. So in terms of the merits, they all seem to be supporting this as I remember it.
Good.
Okay. I'll declare the public hearing on the rezoning for lots 1 and 2, South Fork subdivision, first edition, located at various street addresses on Tripp Street from FSRM to FSRM PUD with shared parking requirements agreement and contract rezoning agreement to be open. Is there anyone that wants to address council under public hearing? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion to continue the public hearing until Thursday, December 2nd.
So moved. Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
John? Aye. Corey Herring?
Aye.
Martin?
Aye.
Edie Hansen?
Aye.
Fisher?
Aye.
Garden?
Aye.
Anything else?
Yep, I have nothing else.
Okay.
Thank you all.
Very
Appreciate
good.
your time.
Thank you. All right, gonna move on to item number 28, public hearing on acceptance of submittal of the 2020-2021 Consolidated Annual Performance and Evaluation Report regarding the CDBG. Ms. Vanessa.
Good evening. I'm really actually glad this is over. It's been a tough year. So what you have before you is a required CAPER report that we have to do at the end of every fiscal year. And for the 2021 year, we spent approximately just over $900,000. The majority of that was spent on the Baker subdivision. We were using actually 1920 rollover funds because it was just messy. Anyway, sorry about that. We also received about $42,000 in program income. And for our home program, we are still in the administrative phase so that we only spent administrative money for home. That's past year. And then, of course, we were implementing our rollover CARES COVID-19 program, which we spent about $475,000 of a $700,000 budget on our rent, utility, mortgage, and utility relief program. So we're excited about the impact that CARES has made. And matter of fact, just to let council know, the city of Ames was monitored because we were one of the few entitlements in our group that has spent over their money. And so I was like, why are we getting monitored? Because you spent money. And I'm like, well, that's great. So I just wanted to share that HUD was excited that we were one of the few entitlements that had spent a significant amount of our money. And so I just wanted to share that. And everything is kind of located in the CARES plan, and that's on our website. And what you have for you is a summary, and then those were kind of the highlights. And as you can see, we're getting very close to getting the Baker subdivision completed, and that's why we rolled all of our CDBG money into the Baker subdivision. And hopefully now we'll be using our home money to finish the Baker subdivision with home ownership and house construction. So that's what I have, unless you have some questions.
Any questions for Vanessa?
Yeah, Vanessa, I have a question. So do you have a sense of when we might see some further development of the Baker subdivision, see some houses or some activity?
I'm hoping next spring and summer. We are in the process of contracting with a home buyer counselor because that's a requirement before we can help people buy a home. They have to go through homeowner education. And so we're very close to getting that contract put together. And hopefully we're going to be doing applications, additional applications. We've been doing applications all along, but we're going to do a push starting next month for more applications so that we can get as many people through the home buyer classes, and then they will hook up with our lender. And then for there, we can go and see what their affordability is, and then look at, we'll be working with home builders to build those houses based on the qualifications of the home buyer.
Yep, great, thanks.
Any other questions? All right, I declare the public hearing on the acceptance and submittal of the 2020-2021 CAPER report in connection with CDBG to be open. Is there anyone who wants to address council under this item? Seeing none, I'll declare the public hearing to be closed. And I would entertain a motion on resolution approving the 2020-2021 CAPER plan.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Moved to second. Any discussion? Roll call.
Aye.
Martin.
Aye.
Feedy Hansen.
Aye.
Betcher.
Aye.
Garten.
Aye.
Jump.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Vanessa. All All right, moving on to item 29, staff report regarding indoor aquatic center updates. Steve?
Yeah, we'd hoped that Keith would be here. He's ill today. He was going to lead the discussion with his report, but I'll try to jump in if I could. Now, the mayor and council, I think, should be very proud of the initiatives that you've undertaken to make this city a much better place. We just talked about the Lincoln Way project. Let's don't forget the Plaza project's moving ahead. It's going to be a dynamic new gathering spot downtown. And today I want to talk about kind of the update and getting some direction from you on the much needed indoor aquatic center. I've got 6 issues I want to go over with you today. And 3 of them, the first 3, and not in any order of importance, will need some direction from you to allow us to proceed. The final 3 are just updates to show you where we're at. So the first issue deals with the delivery of the project. And what I'm trying to do is put together a team that will help us successfully complete the project. Now, one option we could follow in the future for this project would be a more traditional one that you've seen most of all. When we have the city staff working with an architect we hire to design the building, and then we submit those specifications through a competitive process, and we hire a general contractor, right, who submits one unified bid, which includes all the costs for all the numerous subcontracts to accomplish the project. In this scenario, the architect serves as our representative, and any issues we have with the progress of our construction, then the architect deals directly with only one entity, and that's the general contractor. Problems are resolved at that level. And you'll see that in most of the projects we've dealt with. And I won't go into all the details. You have a staff report that Keith prepared and all the strength and weakness and the pros and cons of each one. To me, one of the biggest issues of following the more traditional method is what we need is not only the staff input, because the staff knows very, very well how to design a building to meet their needs from a programmatic standpoint, but we really need some contractor, if you will, expertise to help work with the architect to add that practical expertise and input to the architect so we can make sure that the project can be built, easily built, and more importantly, or equally important, to come in within budget. So there's 2 other options we could follow. We've done in the past. We could have the staff, an architect, and a general contractor, but add to that an advisor. And we've done that in certain cases. If you recall, we used an advisor, I think it was in Integrity, we used on the library expansion. Remember that? Renovation. You don't remember that?
I wasn't on council.
You were here then. You were a citizen. I appreciate it. And also, we've used it. We used at one time the university engineers, where they helped us with the inspections on the ice arena and also on the Furman Aquatic Center. So we contracted with them. They brought that expertise, construction expertise that we don't have as a staff, to help inspect that project. Now, there's a lot of other pros and cons about this particular arrangement. The one thing it fell short on, it didn't allow us to have the frequent inspections we had. Even the advisor's not there on a daily basis, not working with the general contractor. And that's something we need to make sure, I believe, that the project is done correctly. So the last option is we would have the city staff working with an architect, but we would hire a construction manager. We laid out all the aspects of that too. I think the benefit of there is what you don't do is you don't have one bid through a general contractor, in fact, you eliminate the general contractor, and you have multiple bids through all the subcontractors. The construction manager serves as our representative and deals with all the subcontractors, right? We bring them in at the very beginning when we work with the architect in designing the plans. So we have infused some contractor expertise, construction expertise, to make sure the project is done correctly and also comes within our budget. Now, we've never used this particular option before. And I think you know that the high school the school district has used it very successfully in their project, very complex project, and they're very happy with it. In this case, after reviewing all the pros and cons, I think in this particular case, we feel comfortable recommending we explore using a construction manager for this. It's a very complex project. I have no problem using a general contractor with our own staff through an architect when we're dealing with something like a fire station, a $5 million fire station, which is basically an office situation. We've used them on the plaza. We've used them on a multi-million-dollar golf course clubhouse. And we feel comfortable with that. But given the fact of the complexity of this particular swimming pool, basically a pool, and also that our Parks and Rec staff has already engaged, as you know, they completed the clubhouse, but they're going to be engaged in our splash pad, a $3 million splash pad we're working on. We're going to work on our what do you call that thing?
Plaza?
No, sure soccer.
The pitch.
I can't figure pitch all the time. I think it's a curveball. A pitch, mini pitch, and also our ninja course. They're going to be very busy, right?
Yes.
So I think we're going to need the help of these outside construction managers who, as you know, come on site. They're there all the time, making sure the subcontractors are working according to our specifications. Now, there's an extra cost there, but in talking to our construction costing firm, Stecker Harbison, they said that cost can be offset by not using the general contractor who normally marks up the contract and the construction contract to cover their cost of, in essence, managing the project. So I think we can handle the cost there. Now, this will be a solicitation process. We'll probably go out and solicit requests for proposals from different construction management firms and see where we go. We've never had any experience in this. I hope we can arrive at the best company, and we can arrive at a contract we can both be able to support. So that's where we're going. I know there's other people who support very strongly. We stay with the general contractor, and I think there's pros and cons from each one. And you have to understand that doesn't mean I'm always going to recommend this a construction contractor. In fact, we did a $78 million water treatment plant. We did through a general contractor, but I felt comfortable. I had 5 engineers on the staff who almost helped design the building with the architect. They were very knowledgeable and followed that process through. I don't think we have that kind of expertise on aquatic centers right now. So I didn't want to go over all the report, and there's certainly 2 sides to the story. I think you probably got a communication correct from Harold Pike, who feels very strongly that's not the right way to go. I do believe the information is not correct, that what we're talking about here is illegal. Mark could speak to that. We're not talking about a design build project. So I think Mark could clarify that if you're concerned that there's some type of illegality by moving in with a construction manager. I don't know, Mark, if you want to speak to that, or the council wants that clarified at all. You feel comfortable? You understand?
I wouldn't mind, actually. I didn't quite understand his claim in his email, so just to understand that.
Well, Iowa law doesn't allow design build. You have to, do the design first and then hire the contractor. But as I read the email from Mr. Pike, it seemed that his concern was that somehow by having a construction manager, it would lead to design build. I just don't think that's a reality. It's really 2 separate things. So.
I think the only difference is there will be an architect who has design plans that are
Right.
submitted for a competitive bid. It's just each subcontractor will submit the bids. That'll be analyzed by the architect and the construction manager. If you want us to proceed with that, then you're not approving it now. Again, we'll have to go through a solicitation process, see if we can negotiate a contract and come back with you at a later date. But I want to get your direction if you want us to go the more traditional route on this, or to try to use a construction manager in this case. Okay. You want to go through the other ones, the other 2 for direction? The next one then has to do with the architect itself. And we have a number of options here. We could waive your purchasing policy and continue our relationship with RDG. If you tell us that that's the course you want us to follow, we will have to go back and negotiate a fee and a contract and come back with you at a later date also. The argument here using RDG is they were with us from the beginning when we developed the Aquatic Center component of the Healthy Life Center. So they're very familiar with that component. And actually, when we moved on to this separate project, the Indoor Aquatic Center, we've just really used that same concept that they have. We hired them again, if you remember, to develop the separate concept for the Indoor Aquatic Center on this site, but they really pulled their whole concept that they had before. So this would be the third step we moved with them to help them have them move ahead and design the building with us. So you could do that, or you could tell us, no, we want to go out, we want to solicit competitive proposals for the design of the Aquatic Center. Obviously, a new company would have to bring up to speed to understand the concept. The positive thing, I guess, we'd have competitive bids to determine the price or the fee costs, where in the case of the first alternative, we just have to negotiate a fee, which I don't know would be lower than if we took a competitive bid. Probably because we've worked so well with them, they understand their concept, we can move more quickly with RDG, assuming we could negotiate an attractive or a fair, what we both consider to be a fair fee, then we would recommend we move ahead with negotiating with RDG.
Could you clarify the difference in timing? I think that our normal posture should be to always go to a bidding process if possible, but certainly timing is a factor here. I think an architectural firm could pick up and continue the work in its current position. I'm not concerned about the technical aspect of this, but I am sensitive if the bidding process would create an inordinate delay. Could you speak to that?
Well, I wouldn't want to guess right now. It would be a delay, but I wouldn't want to. I have to lay out the time frame on the actual proposal.
Okay.
But it'd certainly be it's more. It would cause a delay from. It'd take longer. Obviously, the process would take longer if we went through a competitive process, proposal process versus selecting them right now. By the way, this is not unheard of. You've done this before. You did it with RDG to move to the second phase. I think we've hired some people for the plaza, did we not? We picked what we thought was the best one, and we went right to them too. We negotiated a fee, and we've done that before for companies you feel confident with.
I think that when the RFP went out years ago for the Aquatic Center, I think it also said that the city reserved the right to continue working with the firm if they were performing satisfactorily, and that they could arrive at an mutually equitable, fee agreement as well too. So for firms that did submit, previously, they know that is a possibility that they could, that may be continuing on. But it's up to council if they want to continue that process or not.
Yeah. So we recommend we move ahead with RDG. Finally, and this is important because I don't want the architect to have to design two buildings. It has to do with whether we go from 1-story or 2-story. And we talked about this before, if you remember, and you want us to come back with 2-story with the thought we could expand on the east side if we ever had to expand the facility for other recreation features. One of the issues, we had an estimate done for us, the difference in cost of going up versus keeping it all on one level. In other words, expanding to the east side, using the east side expansion area for the first phase. There was a savings estimate about $800,000. Now, why that's important is, I'll tell you later on, the estimate from the DOT, unfortunately, were our estimate of $2 million for land costs. They have now finished their formal appraisal and told us that the purchase cost for us will be $2.9 million. So we're about $900,000 short. So by going to single story, that will get us closer to the budget. Okay. But more than that, if you look very closely at that particular site, if you wanted to expand, well, thank you. If you want to, how did that happen? That's just amazing. If you want us to expand to the east there, do you have your little pointer too?
Where Rachel's at?
No, Rachel, could you point down? You're sitting on top of the expansion area right now. If you wanted to go in that area, quite frankly, we'd have to acquire more land anyway. just for the parking lot. So it's a pretty condensed space. In the future, what we're going to need, and I'm telling you now, what we're going to need is something what Nevada is doing. We're going to need more gymnasium space and indoor recreation space. And that is a very compressed spot there. Even if we are able to acquire land to the north of that, there's a lot of smaller lots. So it'd be very difficult to get those lots acquired, I believe, to expand. So probably, I know everybody like us to condense and all of our recreation facilities in the future in one site. I think this could be hard to do anyway. So I think that we feel comfortable for the cost savings, that we will have all the features we talked about on the second floor. We'll just move it down on one level. That'll probably save us an operating cost too, operating costs. So we'll still have the indoor walking track or running track. We'll still have our open recreation area, which we'll have for, we'll have it for cycling, we'll have it for aerobics and things like that. It's all going to be on the second floor. We'll be on the first floor to the east. I don't want at this point to ask the architect now to design 2 buildings if we're going to move quickly on this. So we give up a little expansion, but the expansion was never a given anyway. Now, does that make sense to all of you? You may disagree, but that's our thinking right now on this subject.
I do have one question. When I imagine building the walking track in a separate building with the multi-purpose room, that also sounds like something to me that building could be more effectively repurposed in the future if we were to build there a larger facility somewhere else in town,
right,
and put like a grand walking track in it or something like that.
That's right.
There'd be more possibility to do something else there.
That's right. But I don't want you to think it's necessarily going to be a separate building. We have space to connect it now in one building.
That's great.
It might have a hallway that you split off. I just want you to think it's a separate standalone building. I don't think that'll be the case.
Makes sense.
I don't think you want to have separate HVAC systems and all sorts of things like that.
But also, is it fair to imagine that the walking track would have windows on it? It's not going to have windows into a pool anymore.
Yes,
but
it's
maybe
not elevated. It's not elevated, so I'm sure it'd be easy to renovate that space. You're not going to have very high ceilings, things like that. Renovate for another use. So that would be our recommendation, that we go with 1 story and see how creative the whole level, all the building be in 1 story. See how creative our architect could be. So those are the 3. Before I go into the last 3, are just informational items.
I apologize. So how does the walking track fit in on the second, on the second version? Where's all 1 floor?
Where Rachel pointed down.
So it's just that green space right there.
Yeah.
Yep. Just think the square footage of the building can be expanded in that area. That's where we pick up the square footage. Take the second floor off,
Right.
cut it off, and place it right there.
Okay. Yep.
Okay. All right.
All right. So,
You want to vote on those before we go to the last?
Yeah. So any questions for staff before?
Want to have public input?
Yeah, we open.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Any questions before we open up public input? All right, open up public input. Anyone want to address council on these 3 particular topics?
Good evening, Mike Esposette, Story Construction, 2810 Wakefield Circle. I was here really tonight for the Lincoln Way Development project. I find that exciting as well. It's fortuitous that I'm here for this. So we act as a general contractor and a construction manager really throughout the state. We work with a lot of public entities, school districts, cities, municipalities that deliver projects using a construction manager. It's a very common delivery method in the market. I would concur with a lot of Steve's comments related to this project, the specialty use of the facility being an aquatic center, its size, some of the complexity with a quasi-urban build, and really the supply chain and labor disruption in the market right now wants us all as contractors, architects, and owners to link arms and use all of our wisdom from start to finish and not link the chain together through time, because it's a turbulent time that we live in now. So I would just simply support staff's recommendation. I think that makes a lot of sense for this project at this time in Ames.
Can I ask one question? So I had the opportunity to spend some time with Mike at the high school, and he gave me an introduction to the use of the lean process. And could you speak a little bit, just because this is a big topic, but could you concisely explain the benefits of what a construction manager would bring in terms of efficiency of construction?
Sure. The high school is a pretty good example of it, but any project really can be. So architects design what the ultimate outcome is. That's really their job. They don't often have the benefit of thinking of how a team would put it together efficiently and effectively to be attractive in the marketplace for people to want to show up. So a construction manager comes alongside the owner, comes alongside the design team, and thinks through how it will go together so that when the bids are taken to the marketplace can provide pricing and competitive bids for the game plan and the outcome, not just the outcome without knowing the game plan.
Thanks.
Could you just comment too on obviously it's very volatile price wise, right now. There's just a difference when you serve as a general contractor bidding a competitive project versus being CM. Maybe help council understand, a little bit how those two things work in terms of because we've already experienced 15% increase already. We have a finite amount of money available, and so just maybe help unpack that a little bit.
So as a general contractor, we and any general contractor has finite resources. And on a project like this, you want the right resources to be available at the right time when it comes to market. But you can't really shelve them for 6 months or 9 months and wait for it to show up. So it's somewhat of a game of timing. Timing not just for the general contractor, but then for all the trade contractors to be able to bring their right people forward and get the material supply commitments from them. As a construction manager, you pick that partner through a professional selection process. So you're picking your team leader and you're picking your advocate. Contractors work for themselves. Construction managers work for you. It doesn't, we act as a contractor all the time, so that's not a disparaging statement. It's simply a different thought process and delivery. So we're here to represent public interest. We're here to represent your interest and make sure that the outcome is what is designed. And with that comes attention to supply chain, attention to market volatility, some guidance and encouragement during the design process for both city staff and the architect to say, hey, if we choose this roof system, it might take 12 months to get. If we choose this metal panel, it's a $42 square foot decision as compared to a $26 square foot decision. So where do you want to pick your spots, and how can we design something that stands the test of time but can be delivered gracefully in this time?
Thank you. Any other questions for Mike? Thank you.
Yeah, good. Thanks.
Anybody else? All right, close public input. So we'll go back to the first item. General contractor with a advisor, general contractor, traditional design bid build, construction manager. What is your thoughts?
You want a motion?
Sure.
I'd move that we follow staff's recommendation to go with the construction manager model on this.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion?
Just one comment. So by doing this, it's not that we devalue the contributions. Harold Pike has built a lot of our buildings in town, right? So this isn't anything, and we appreciate his desire to help us to do things in a legal manner. It's just I think this is the right fit for this project.
Okay. Those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstaining? Motion carried. All right. Second option, our second thing is RDG continuing on or go out for competitive proposals, which RDG may also submit on and may be selected also. But that's the second option.
I would move that we move ahead to hire RDG to design the Aquatic Center.
Second. Discussion? All right, those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any opposed? Carried. And then the issue 3 is 2 floors or 1 floor?
I would move that we build 1 floor.
Second.
Okay, discussion?
This one feels a little harder to me than the others. I just wish that we didn't have to make the decision, right? I wish that, we had the money to build like a sparkly 2-story thing. But when I look at the council goals, the goal that we adopted was to build an indoor aquatic center. I think it's great that we're getting a walking track. It's totally appropriate. I think this is a reasonable compromise, and I think it could still end up being very nice. It removes what I imagine some of the complexities would be in suspending this track with acrylic or whatever it's going to be. I don't know how it would work, but I think a 2-story thing could be wonderful. I just I think it's not a bad motion.
My frustration is that I feel like we're being painted in this corner by the DOT, taking a posture that this bid, I hope I'm not being on a line here, but this bid just seems completely discordant with reality. And so.
You mean the price, the
Correct.
price on the land?
Correct. And so I feel like we're having to make a major decision on behalf of the community based upon something that's just it's not fair. And I don't mind paying the fair price for this property, but 2.9 million for this just seems very discordant. And so that's sort of forcing us, another governmental entity, to make a hard decision like this. It just strikes me as very odd. That's as political as I'm going to be tonight.
I have to say, I appreciate the fact, though, that it looks like we may accrue some operating cost savings by doing this. And since we know that aquatic centers always lose money, no matter how great they are, reducing operating costs seems like a worthy outcome.
Okay, those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carried. All right, thank you. Moving on to issue 4 for information only.
I told you about the $2.9 million. Last one, probably more important to me, is availability. We met with them a couple of months ago, and as you know, they're planning to move the people who are in those buildings right now on the site that we want into their main office, but they really aren't going to complete their renovation for a couple of years. Now, we told them we can't wait 2 years to get in there and build a facility. It takes 2 years. We have 4 years without a swimming pool, indoor swimming pool for this city, and that's unacceptable. So they said they're going to work, see if there's any short-term relocation possibilities. They haven't got back to us yet, so we still have to work with them. They in this case, I think they want to work with us if possible, if there's space and the relocation, but they haven't had it figured out yet. We've got to do that in pretty short order because I don't want to hire an architect and start building on a site that we don't know we have that site. I don't know if it'd be acceptable if we wait 2 years to start. So I'm optimistic right now I'm optimistic they're going to help us find a way to relocate their offices so we could begin. If we start designing, take a year, 9 months to design, we could start building next year, but they'd have to be able to relocate by then. We asked about building keeping them in and building the half of the property. They were not supportive of that. It's pretty complex to do that. So I think our best bet is to hopefully get their cooperation to move people temporarily out of there till they get their final locations in the main building in 2 years. So I got to keep you posted on that. It's very important, though.
I'll share with Steve too, is that as hard as it is to bite the pill or take the pill on the 2.9 million, it's almost more important is timing, because if we're at 6% inflation right now, if we're at 25 million for this project, we just added every year, $1.5 million to the price tag. So to me, it's like, if we got to negotiate, I think for sure trying to negotiate sooner than better, sooner in order to get this thing going. Otherwise, a couple more years and it's going to really continue to skyrocket.
That's correct.
Issue 5.
fundraising, Dan Cohane, take a bow there. Dan, you out there? Look at him. He's out there. He's waving. He helped raise over $8 million combined. Is that the total? Is that still the total, Dan? I don't know. Is it 8,257,000?
He's gonna have a big announcement here for us.
He's got a check. He's got a check for 10 more million.
He's rounding up
all
his,
paid for.
with his own money.
Well, it's small, but it's big. We sent some invoices out in the last couple of weeks, and people wanted to pay. We sent an invoice for $5,000 to a family here in town, and they returned it with a check. Returned the invoice with a check for $10,000. So that was great. Picked up another $25,000 last night, and unfortunately, in the fundraising business, and I'm not a professional fundraiser, but it feels like as you get to the end, it trickles in smaller amounts. We had some nice large amounts to start. You gave me a great base with the Winokur estate dollars of $2 million to start with. So we're at about just under $10.3 million right now, with the additional $25,000 that came in last night from a local business. Right now, I'm just trailing people that I've talked to in the last 6 months, and I've got a few hanging out there. But I'm hopeful that Story County may still be able to do something. I continue to talk to the supervisors, and so we're working through that process.
There's a point we're just going to have to cut it off. We're going to move ahead because we're about where we said. Remember, we would have about $10 million. The council was talking about issuing up to $21 million. So that price tag, if we move ahead quickly, we're still about $31 million for the total project. And that does, I want to keep emphasizing, that does not account for any of the reinvestment money. So if zero money comes in, we're still going to move ahead with this project. We're not relying on it. If the money does come in, each year when it comes in, it'll help reduce the debt service for that year. So we will be able to lower the cost of this project each year to the taxpayer. But we're not counting on it in this particular situation. Dan, stay up there because Dan's been raising it. Now, I pointed out to him with the Healthy Life Center, we had something in writing, pledge notice in writing. And that's good business. People advise me we should always do that. So we still have to get pledge cards sent out to people. But Dan, I think you're indicating that people would rather give their pledges to Ames Foundation, right? Is that we're hearing?
Well,
So
that's the legal entity the money's going through is through the Ames Foundation.
they don't really have to do that. They could give it directly to the city, but I think they feel more comfortable doing it that way.
I don't know if it's comfort. I think it's tax benefit.
Well, I think you can get it from us too. But
Can you? I
Yeah,
didn't know
sure,
that.
Sure.
Actually, I originally had it run through the foundation because it ultimately helped the Ames Foundation too.
Yeah, okay. But we may have to come up, we're trying to work with Mark, I think, to develop a pledge situation that although it's given to the foundation, it's a pledge to the city of Ames. We're going to have to get that pretty well wrapped up too, and we'll show you there's some that are multi-year pledges too, and we'll have it all laid out for you.
And I would add too, I think the dollars that'll actually be hanging out there will be less than $300,000.
Yeah, because there's two big ones up front.
There's two big ones, and the rest of it is 25,000s and 50s
Right.
and hundreds. Still really important to the process, but when they start paying down on those things,
Right.
the pledges don't amount to
So
much.
we still have to do that small step, important step we do before we ever enter into a construction contract. We'll get that all lined up for you.
I've also had a couple people that wanted to pledge over a couple of years say they're going to write a check for the whole amount once the city gives the go ahead to the project.
Good.
And
Good.
I like to be optimistic and say, well, it's going to go. And they're like, well, has the city council yet? And I said, no, not really, but I think it's going to go. You know, that goes.
Well, as soon as they enter into the agreement with the buy the land and with the architect and the construction manager, that's a go because those are big contracts.
Well, and while the fundraising is not done, the vast majority of it is.
Yep.
I'm encouraged by the way people have responded because when we went to Des Moines 3 or 4 months ago to give the Iowa reinvestment proposal, it was a goal of $10 million.
Right.
And we've exceeded that by a little over $250,000 to date. I think we'll get some more. Will we get a lot more? Probably not. But it's all in all, people have been pretty receptive. People love the project.
Yeah.
And I don't think what I've been showing them is a 2-story building. I don't think that matters. They love the assets and the amenities of the facility. They love the walking track. Glad you're keeping that in. And so all in all, a really, really good project. And I applaud all of you for continuing to push forward.
Well, thanks to you for volunteering to do this too.
Thank you.
Appreciate it very much.
And then I think you've seen I've outlined the budget to where we are today. I'm actually going to try to find you a little bit more money on that budget, that project, because the construction budget we have right now doesn't include heat pumps or any kind of sustainability issues, maybe solar on the roof. That's not in our original one. So I'm going to, when you see on the 14th, how I'm going to recommend we spend the $14 million that we have for the Rescue Act. I think we want to put some aside for that for a lot of reasons. We want to be role models for our projects, but as Gloria says, those are big consumers of utilities in a swimming pool. So I don't have that built in yet, but we're going to show you some money we could set aside for it. So the project's actually going to go up a little bit too, but in the long run, we're going to have not only helping the environment, but we'll probably have operating savings, right? If we go to some of those things that we can design. So stay tuned for that too, okay? That's all I really wanted to say.
David.
Yeah, I can't remember if we've discussed this before, but has there been any discussion of the possibility of geothermal on this site?
That's what I'm talking about. We don't have that built in. I'll have to give you more money. It's more money up front, savings and operating costs.
Got it.
So that 30 million, 31 million doesn't have that built in. So that's why I got to find you some more money. So who can't be excited about all the projects we're working on today? Come on, this is great times here.
Great time. It's amazing. All right, any questions? Thank you. We'll move on to disposition and communications to council, which we have none this evening. So we're on to council comments. Rachel, go ahead and start with you.
I just hope everyone has a good Thanksgiving and with their family and gets to spend some time off. That's it.
Thank you. Gloria?
I was just going to wish everyone a happy Thanksgiving. That's it.
So I'm going to tell a quick story. I am very thankful for our city staff. And I had the opportunity to spend the weekend in Mississippi. And I visited a city, I won't mention the name, that's not that much smaller than Ames. And the disparity between neighborhoods in terms of the quality of streets was stunning. So the neighborhoods that had nice houses had cobblestone streets, these ornate lighting fixtures, and a few blocks over, poor part of town, the streets were in terrible repair and there were no lights. It wasn't a matter there were poor lights, there were no lights. And so in Ames, we make our decisions on streets based upon the condition of the street and not where you live. And I'm very grateful to be in a community that creates parity in terms of our infrastructure. And so appreciate John and his team delivering that. So there's my comment tonight. Thank you.
Amber?
Nothing for me?
Not tonight.
Nothing for me, thanks.
Just echo everyone else, and that is wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving, and we will look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks. So,
To adjourn.
thank you.
I told Amy it was